Welcome once again. My name is Mark Riley. I'm the General Manager of the Bid Academy, which is the training division of BidWrite, Australia's largest bidding consulting organisation. So the topic for today is all about persuasive bid writing, and specifically, there's a big old topic there in its own right. But what I wanted to do in the session today was concentrate and drill down into the use of what we call the ISBP framework, which is a little technique that we've been using at BidWrite and in the Bid Academy for a long while now. So I wouldn't mind if you'd help me out. I can see a good number of people on the call. Just in the chat, would you just pop a yes in there if you've heard of the ISBP framework? And we're obviously going to go through it, what it is and how it works, or a no if you've never heard of it before. So I can make sure that we are on the money with the content that we deliver. All right, thanks to you folks. There's a few yeses, a couple of no's. Good. All right, so let's just circle in on what I'd like to get out of this session for you guys in the next little while. We're going to talk a little bit about the theory behind persuasive writing. Then I want to move into the nitty-gritty of how you do it in practice, right? So again, we're going to concentrate in on the ISBP tool. And then what we're going to do is just take you through, introduce you to a couple of our training programs that we run out of the Bid Academy, which is a great way for you to actually deep dive and get in and master these skills in practice. All right, that's the plan. So I can see we've got a bit of a mix in the chat. And by the way, on the way through, any questions and things like that, do pop them in the chat and I will do my best to pick them up. All right, let's get into it. So persuasive writing in theory. First thing that we want to do when we are writing our bids is to get into the mind of our buyers, right? So believe it or not, there are human beings on the other side of what can be sometimes quite an ugly feeling procurement process. Sorry if there's any procurement people on the call. But remember, our buyers are hot-blooded humans that have biases based on reason, experience, and emotion. They're busy, right? So we want to kind of try to make their life as easy as possible. They want to understand what's special about us. You can imagine the average buyer or evaluator that is confronted with a whole load of tenders to try and work out what really matters. And here's the really important thing, right? Quite often, not necessarily careers, but futures, and there's a lot of weight on the decisions that your buyers make, right? So they really want to feel comfortable with the decision that they make, right? So well, let's have a think about that decision. If you think about it, your buyers basically can choose from four pathways, right? They can do nothing. They can do it themselves, whatever it may be. Sometimes they could anyway. Or they can pick someone else, or they can pick you. And obviously, our job as demon bid writers is to actually influence and persuade those people to make a choice in our favor. All right, so that brings in the topic of persuasion. So a nice simple definition of it. Persuasion is the act of convincing or influencing others to adopt a particular point of view or course of action, i.e. pick us, right? So a key thing that, so for us to win, we need to persuade, and for us to persuade, we need to gain trust, all right? And that's a super important and powerful word, right? So so let's just dig in a little bit into trust and what that means. Now, those that have been in and around the Academy before, we quite often talk about this concept called the trust triangle, which was coined in its most recent version by Francis Frey and Anne Morris in the Harvard Business Review a few years ago now. But essentially what that means is when we're communicating as bid writers, we want to make our readers feel that what we're saying is logical, all right? That it makes sense, that your judgment that you're showing me is sound, and I can kind of feel good about what it is you're proposing. So think about that in the context of the writing that we do when we're putting our tender responses in. The second thing that makes up the second corner of the trust triangle is empathy. And that is a really, really critical one, and something that is often missing from bid writing that we see in our organization, and I've seen personally in 25 years or something of writing bids, right? And that's empathy, all right? And that is that through the way that we write and the way that we communicate, we believe that, or your reader or your buyer will feel that you care genuinely care about them and their success, right? And that is you think about it, super important and often quite a seismic shift that we need to make in the way that we communicate. And then finally, the is authenticity, and that is that your readers or your buyers, your evaluators are feeling that they're getting the genuine you, right? If anyone's ever heard of words like industry leading, best in breed, that type of stuff that can creep into sales documents and tender writing can actually undermine that kind of authenticity tick in the box from the trust triangle's perspective. So a really important concept, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But first, I just wanted to get everyone on the same page around the ISBP framework. All right, so this is a very simple structural framework that you can use in all sorts of different communications. So let's just go through what those 4 little letters stand for. First up, the I stands for issue, and this is really encouraging we as writers to reflect back to the customer what really matters to them. What's the issue behind the request that they've made, the question that they're asking, or it might be in terms of some sort of free form or proactive proposal. What's the core problem that we're trying to solve for the customer? The S stands for solution, which is our happy space. This is where we get to talk about ourselves and what we're going to do. But again, when in the ISBP framework, we're trying to shift the focus of that narrative to be around how do we solve those customer problems that we've kind of unpicked with the issue part of it. Then the B stands for benefits. So that's kind of the what do your customers get out of this? And then the proof, the P stands for proof. All right. So that is essentially trying to convince or increase confidence levels in your reader of your ability to sort of deliver on the outcomes that you've sort of mentioned earlier in the structure. So that's the framework in a nutshell. Just in terms of how you can apply it, we call this the pyramid of persuasion, but you can apply ISBP at all sorts of levels in your communication. So starting at the top with emails and cover letters. By the time you finish this course, you'll be able to go in and ask for a pay rise with your boss in a very persuasive way. So all good. Exec summary is another great place to use the ISBP structure. And of course, you can use a response or section level, I should say, or it could be returnable schedules, or it could be at individual question level, or even at individual paragraph level. So very flexible tool, and there's a bit of an art form in the real world in terms of choosing when to ISBP and when not to, if that makes sense. The other thing I want to do very quickly is just to connect the concepts behind the ISBP back to the trust triangle, right? So remember, we've got our three corners, logic, empathy, and authenticity. And if you think about it, the I and the B, the issues and the benefits, all underpin that kind of empathy part of the trust triangle. Underpinning the logic part, we've got the solution and the proof bit, and also down in authenticity. Those two categories of content in particular talk not very nicely to the logic and the authenticity bit, right? So that just sort of puts in context, and that's why this framework actually works so well, in that it sort of talks to the trust triangle. But if you think about it, those 4 types of content, issues, solution, benefit, and proof, are the sorts of information that we as human beings need in order to feel a positive response. So I don't know, imagine if you were getting some work done on your house, right? And the builder comes in and says, hey, look, I get you've got a small family. I'm going to try to work in safely and as cleanly around that as I can. Here's the approach I'm going to do. Oh, and by the way, I just built a house around the corner for somebody else who had 4 kids, right? So it's just that kind of presenting the right type of information and all the information that we need in order to elicit a positive response in our reader. All right, so that's the theory. Okay, so let's have a look. How does it actually work in practice? So let's dive in a little bit. Now, ISBP, in terms of, if you think about the 4 components of this persuasive framework, in terms of ease, or should I say increasing complexity, the S is the easiest bit, right? We're all very comfortable typically talking about ourselves and our solution. Then the benefits bit gets a little bit harder. If you've been in and around bid writing for a while in more mature organizations, we get conditioned to think benefits rather than features, et cetera, et cetera. The proof bit quite often is missing as well. So it gets a little bit harder to make sure you've got the right types of proof that are available to sort of support your argument. And then in terms of the biggest challenge, and we look at hundreds and hundreds of pages of bids every year, right? The thing that is quite hardest to do is the I part. So setting up the scene in a meaningful way, so that connects with your reader, right? So what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about that. The good news is that all of this is going to get a little bit easier. I don't know if anyone's heard of generative AI. If you have, pop it in the chat. And if you haven't, you must have been living under a rock. But a lot of this sort of framework stuff is now, we're actually at BidWrite building our own generative AI platform called BidWrite GPT. And we're actually embedding a lot of this IP. So for example, the use of the ISBP framework in there in sort of a coaching capacity so that AI can help you do a better job of applying ISBP. But you still need to know how it works, right, team? So let's get into it a little bit more deeply. All right, so I mentioned getting good issue statements was the biggest problem that we see. So let's just unpack that a little bit, right? So if you do issue statements really well, they show insight, they reflect the concern or need of the customer in relating to that question or the problem that we're solving. And then really importantly, they help you get the main body of the response right. So if you think about it, if you sit down and unpick with your subject matter experts or your stakeholders that are around you in any one bid, take time to get the purpose of the question super clear, and that might help you focus the rest of the response, right? So that is when issue statements are particularly helpful from our own perspective, right? Let alone that from the customer. It also forces you to talk about the customer, which is really good. Gets you to explore their world, and that will help connect and build empathy with people reading your stuff, right? So done well, strong issue statements elicit a positive response in the reader because you kind of relax and you kind of go, oh yeah, these guys get this. Now, if we don't do it so well, things like this can happen. They can sound motherhoody or waffly or vague. And this, if you don't know what the issues are, the tendency is to try to make stuff up and fill it in. And sometimes having a motherhoody or waffly or a vague issue statement is almost worse than having no issue statement. Could also be incorrect. If you're making stuff up, you have to be careful. Issue statements work really well when they are accurate and insightful. So if you're not either of those, you might turn off your readers. They can also appear negative sometimes. All right, what else do they do? So if they're generic, they don't really help. And also can be repetitive if you're always starting saying, we understand that, yada, 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 right? And the main thing is also to only use them when there is, if you use them when there isn't a need. So, tell me your company address. Oh, it's important that, there's an address to send letters. Don't really need it in that instance. So you need to pick and choose your issue statements or when and where to use them. And remember that poor issue statements can actually put off your reader, right? So, because it can be the first thing that they read, right? And if that needs to be on the money, and if it isn't, you're going off down a path that you might not want to go down. All right, so next time you write an issue statement, and for those like Barnaby that haven't used it before, give it a go on the next opportunity that you have. Just have a go at it and say, is this opening to this response specific to the customer situation and their request? Is it specific to their real world? Does it start with a reflection about your customer? Does it show real insight? And this is where a lot of people talk about their experience and the capability and the quality of their team in their tenders. This is your opportunity to show real insight into your customer's world, right? So if you're trying to deliver a service in a remote part of Australia, showing that you really understand that from your experience through a really powerful written issue statement is a good way to connect with your customer. Does it identify the real rather than the assumed concerns? And again, for often time poor bid writers, if you're short of real insight, the tendency is to try to have a guess at what we think the issues are. So we really want to try to focus in and take the time to drill in on those real issues behind the scenes, and that's what cuts through with your customers. So we want it to be short and sharp, so that it doesn't bang on and on and on, but it does enough to show that your customers are to show your customers that you are coming at this problem from their perspective. Here's a little example. This one's talking about this is a question, so asking us to detail our understanding of the requirement to identify and escalate conditions posing a risk, etc., to this particular scenario. So all we need to do is just open up with a little sentence that says something like, hey, you know what, we get that that these risks present a immediate danger to residents at your property, and you're going to need to do A, B, and C, and then we launch into our solution description, right? So pretty straightforward stuff. All right, so that's the I. Doug, yes, you will be able to get, there'll basically be a recording coming out tomorrow. Doug's just popped a question into the chat around being able to get a copy of these slides. All right, so back to ISBP. Let's talk about the solution part of it. Now, this is our happy space. Oh, Sarah, you got your hand up. Do you want to just pop your question in the chat? I'm not sure I can, maybe I can turn you on and you can speak. Hang on. Go for the chat, probably the way to go for the moment. If we don't get to you straight away, I'll make sure I come back to you later on. All right, solution. So this is our happy place. Just some few tips on what to include, right? So the tendency can be to include a whole load of things. But what we want to do to remember, we're trying to persuade somebody, so we only want to give them the information that's going to give them that warm feeling that we're going to solve their problem for them, right? So we want to really focus in on the parts of the offer that talk to the win theme or the problems that you're solving. We want to reinforce the benefits of your approach and your capabilities, and in an ideal world, be talking about the things that only you can offer. And the other thing that we quite often forget to do when we're talking about our solution is to address any weaknesses openly and honestly, which might sound counterproductive. But if you think about it, if you're in a strategy session on your side trying to work out how you're going to win, there'll be other people in strategy sessions trying to work out how to win themselves. And one of the things they'll be trying to do is to expose your weaknesses. So you need to be aware of them and make sure you take them on when you're talking about your solution. Some ideas on frameworks that you can follow. Remember, we're down in that S part of ISBP. So you could either follow the components of your solution, so the people, the equipment, infrastructure, etc. You could follow the scope of work as set out in specifications, for example, or you could follow a timeline, right? There's probably sometimes there's a whole load of other sub questions and things like that that you might need to follow, but if you don't have that, then these three frameworks are good ways to go. All right, so not too much on solution today. I think we're all of them, like I said before, was the bit that we're most comfortable about. Key takeout is less is more, I think, for the solution. Focus on the customer's problems, and if you can, accentuate your strengths and mitigate your weaknesses as you go through. All right, onto the B part. Now, some of the issues that we see are quite often there's a whole load of untapped value out there. And I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by that in a second, but we quite often, because we're working at pace on potentially a lot of opportunities with lots of competing priorities, sometimes taking the time to uncover the real value that is on offer doesn't happen, right? So we might fall back on the same conventional benefits that we offer. Safe pair of hands, low risk transition, that type of stuff. But there's a whole load of world out there around value that your customers care about, and taking the time to dig into that, super important. The second problem we see with benefits is being vague. All right, and I'll come back to this in a little bit. I'm talking about not really making any commitments. So we might significantly increase something, or we may, or we intend to do something, etc., etc. So being vague is a problem. And then quite often our benefit statements rather randomly are more about us than our competitors, right? So so those are the things we're trying to avoid. So just take a quick drink. All righty. So let's dig around a little bit more to try and find more value that we can uncover and communicate in our benefit statements, right? So you've all got access, or some people have got access to the customer, absolute gold. Sounds funny to say, why don't you just ask your customer? But quite often, if you're in the tender phase, the opportunity to do that is relatively limited. So we need to have done it early, right? Then you've got your customer-facing colleagues, and then so 1 and 2 are kind of potentially sources of gold, right? Where you might get insight into what the customer benefits or their values, I should say, without it necessarily being in the RFP, right? And that's kind of the gold stuff that we want to make sure that we use. Then 3 and 4 will probably typically in the RFP documentation. So obviously we go looking for the stated objectives or requirements or the evaluation criteria, but everybody's kind of got those. So in terms of goldness, they're kind of useful and we should talk to them and be aware of them. But they get trumped if you've got any insights from the customer, right, in terms of what they really are concerned about. And if you don't have access to any of those, then you've got annual and strategic reports and web searches and things like that, where you can, a good old annual strategic report might give you some ideas around the organizational objectives that your customers have, which again, you can use to start creating a value story and feed through into your benefits statement. There's a whole load of different types of value out there. Those that have been around the academy before will have seen something similar to this. I love this diagram simply because it gives you sort of 5 buckets of risk that are applicable in many organizations today. And the purpose of including them really is to sort of challenge ourselves as bid writers to look under every rock that we possibly can to find as much value as we can from our customers. So you'll notice that all of those benefits are kind of quite positive in the terms of the language that they use. We're looking to do something. We're looking to lower operating costs or increase revenue or reduce waste or what have you. Some positive outcome-based areas of value. So dig around, look under all the rocks, and see if you can find more types of value to communicate in your benefit statements. Now, I mentioned the issue we've seen around benefit statements quite often being vague. Here's an example. We use this one a lot in our training just because it sort of illustrates the point quite nicely. If you're under pressure, moving at pace, trying to get your bid in, the tendency is towards vagueness, right? Because it's low risk and we're not being committal. The savings on your service costs could be substantial over the longer term. There's kind of nothing in there really. So if you think about that from being persuaded as an evaluator, it says that I'm not particularly confident. I haven't really done the work to see what real benefits are going to be on offer, but kind of think there might be something in there. So it doesn't help with persuasion, right? But if you look at the second example where we've taken the time to try to quantify the savings and put a time frame on it, it just sounds a lot more believable and certainly is a lot more persuasive. But of course, that takes time, right, to do all that good stuff. So we're big advocates at the Bid Academy. We think quantification of value is one of the key things that's not done consistently by your competitors potentially at the moment. So we're advocates of actually having a value communication work stream built into your bid response planning program and actually treat it as a line that gets governance in its own right. All right, so benefits, be specific, look for as much value as you can, think outside the box, think of it from your customer's perspective. What have they told you over your past engagements that they care about, and try and get all that thinking and logic into your into the B part of your ISBP. All right, the last part of the P is the proof bit. There's lots and lots of different types of proof. This is a key if you are about to embark on a major bid. One of the key hygiene areas that you want to be working on before the bid comes out is all the different types of proof you might need to be including in your response, right? So over on the left-hand side, you've got what we call general credibility builders. So things like general experience statements, testimonials, social media, photos, videos, etc. They're great for just building confidence in your reader in a more general sense. So yeah, we've got lots of experience in the rail engineering sector, or lots of experience in pharma and or laboratory construction, whatever it is. Over on the right-hand side, this is much more targeted confidence builders, right? So looking at past results that tie to a particular topic, some sort of social proof, industry awards, guarantees, very specific things that help build your confidence. Whole topic in its own right, proof, but one key takeout for using it is if you can tie your proof to the win theme or the issue that you're talking about, then that makes it all the more powerful. So if you're saying that you're estimating that you're going to be able to reduce operating costs by 15% a year, some correlating proof in the the past results of having done that before, in a similar situation for a customer in a similar industry, we were able to generate 25% year-on-year savings. So just tying the proof point to the topic or the win theme or the issue, super important. All right, so that's coming through the back end of the ISBP part of it. So what we've got at the moment, imagine that we've potentially got a schedule that we've structured using ISBP, or we've got a particular question that we've applied ISBP to. So we might have a few pages of text. There's more that we can do in terms of persuasive writing to help influence the reader, and that's using a process that we call popping in the Bid Academy. So really what we're trying to do is make your content pop off the page. So having spent up until this point getting the right stuff in there and structuring it around ISBP, then there's some things that we can do to make the content jump off the page and therefore contribute to the positive feeling that your customers have when they read it, right? Some of these are very basic, right? But nonetheless, things like bullets and tables are fantastic if you ever have pages and pages and pages of stuff. Looking for opportunities to break all of that up into bullets and tables is a really good idea, because what your eye does is go straight to the table and through there, and so sort of will help land key messages, for example, and PowerPoint, bless them with their creation of the bullet points. Whether they created it, I don't know, but a very well used example is on PowerPoint slides. But what they do is if you use them well, your eye goes to that little cluster. But obviously you don't want to use too many bullet points and things like that, otherwise they lose their effect. Using headlines, not headings, is an important one. Think newspapers. Think the big bold text on newspapers or online versions of them these days. What we're trying to do is avoid headings like introduction or methodology or program. We want to be saying something that's a little bit more appealing, right? So let's say we're talking about program, it might be delivering this project 3 months ahead of time, or it might methodology, it might be working safely in and around an operating environment, whether that's an oil and gas plant or rail corridor or what have you. So swap your headings into headlines if you can. Helps with navigation, helps people skim read, it helps people get the gist of what it is you're trying to say. And then and in doing so, it'll mean that if they want to read deeper, they can do that, but they also get that all important emotional connections and positive response for you. All right, next up, graphics. We all love some graphics. Human brain loves graphics. If you want people to remember stuff, using imagery is a good way to go. If you're introducing trends, let's say go back to the operating cost example, year-on-year reduction in Operating costs presented graphically is going to have a lot more appeal, and more importantly, will go into what the part of the brain that will get where it will land and be remembered. So get graphics in there, really helpful to cut through and get people to remember your gear. And then the final little one sounds like a basic technique, but using call out boxes, just little graphic devices that will help pull the eye to key parts of the page and land core messages. So great way to wrap your proof points up into a little call out box, or if you've got a key message that you want people to remember. All right, there was a lot in there. Any questions, folks? Just pop them in the chat if you do have, and we will go from there. We're doing all right for time. So all right, so those we've been through a little bit of the theory of persuasive writing, a little bit of the ins and outs of using just the ISBP portion of a big topic around persuasive writing. And now we're just going to have talk a little bit about how we master those skills. Question in from Craig. Read the issue statement. To be clear, are we suggesting using this an issue statement when it isn't asked for? Weave it in. Absolutely, yeah. So Craig, the idea is we open up all of our responses where we think there's a sort of bigger intent behind the question, and just open with that little acknowledgement that we kind of get the context of what it is that they're asking for. So you think of that ISBP as the framework of your response. And so as you start writing it, you go, okay, I need some I stuff, get the I in, all right, and then into the S. Now I need the B stuff. And then I need the P at the end of proof. And if you want to change the order, you can put the B's up, put the benefits earlier if you want to do that, that's all fine. It's more just trying to make sure that we've got the right type of stuff in there. Hopefully that answers your question, Craig. All righty, let's crack on. So let's talk about mastering these skills, right? So you might kind of think, oh, where am I now? I want to learn something new. I don't have the time. How do I remember everything? Where do I get good, reliable stuff from? How do I pick a program? There's lots of options out there. And what do I need to learn? So this is a bit where we just introduce a couple of our programs that we run at the BID Academy. We call them modular learning programs, and there's two main ones that are relevant to the topics that we've been talking about today. You can see the various makeups of each of those programs down the left-hand side. We've got the BID Accelerator here, which if you need to master best practice across the entire bidding cycle, so through strategic planning, pursuit management, proposal development, presentations, negotiations, that's the one. Or if you just want a deep dive into best practice bid writing, then the Certified Bid Writer program is your one. So they're both modular, and I'll talk for why we've done that. The BID Accelerator covers a little bit more, so that's 12 modules, whereas the Certified Bid Writer is just in 9. And the other main difference is in the bid writing course, we get you to do some bid writing in the form of course assignments. So you actually get the chance to take some content, progress it through the learning experience, and come out with actually fully enhanced stuff at the other end if you do that. Both programs have got all delivered through an online learning management system. Both programs have live coaching in between each of the modules to help you embed the learnings, I should say. Both programs have online quizzes and exams so that you can kind of master your ideas and your interpretation of the content that's been shared, and both get you a micro credential at the end. All right, so just a little bit about how it all works. Essentially, if you join up for one of these programs, we log you into our learning management system, which means you can access your course whenever you want to. We do run the learning cohort through the modules together, so you can't be zooming ahead, but you can get in and do the module of the week whenever that suits you. So you can fit it in and around your working day. So why modular learning, right? Well, BidWrite's been involved in training for years and years and years, and done thousands of different, trained thousands of people and hundreds of different engagements, right? And what we know, as despite our best efforts, is that in conventional learning, so I'm talking about your half-day workshops, a couple of days of training, there's a lot of volume, and most of it's kind of one way coming in over a very short duration. And what that means is that quite often the interpretation is a personal one, so you conditionally bias it based on what you're doing at the moment, and so that may or may not be right. The other thing is, if you don't use it, you kind of lose it, and what that means is you can have low retention rates of content and a low return on your investment of time and money, right? So that's why we've kind of come up with this modular program where we break the learning down into logical steps and work with the learning cohort through each one, making sure you've mastered the concepts through the live coaching sessions. And what we're finding is the learning cohorts all really come together as quite a nice team where they're sharing ideas and experiences and things like that. So we're finding getting far better results from this type of training, which on the face of it might seem quite a lengthy process, but actually people just get into a rhythm of doing an hour or two a week and working with their team and mastering the courses as they go on. All right, so just a reminder, both programs are going to cover the things that you need to know to get the outcomes you want. Everything in there is practical, real-world stuff that's been proven on bids over the last 15 to 20 years. And it really helps you master the skills in a logical sequence. And a key thing, bidding people, is that you can fit it in with your bidding lifestyle. Oh, Georgia's got a question. You mentioned building a value communication workstream into your bid plan. Can I elaborate on what I mean? Yeah, absolutely. I think if you think about the average bid plan at the moment, we might have a pricing stream, a legal stream, what else would have? We'd have a content development stream. We might have a risk management stream. What we're talking about there is actually having a value communication work stream. So in there, we want to be able to make some commitments to the customer. Let's go back to that operating costs example, Georgia. So we might want to make a specific commitment to that customer, which means we need to do some work, right? We can't just make it up. Otherwise, everyone will get worried, and we'll say, let's take that commitment to a percentage out and put significantly or some or something like that. So it's defining the need to be able to make powerful value commitments or benefit statements as a defined workflow that is resourced and monitored and becomes part of your governance, just like your pricing is checked thoroughly and your win strategies are checked and so on and so forth. Hopefully that answers the question. I'll come back to you, Georgia, if it doesn't. Just back to the training. Some really good results coming out. I won't go through all of these, but these were 3 recent members of our alumni that are sort of really enjoying. They're saying things like practicality of the course, comprehensiveness of it, being able to sort of increase the chances of winning bids, etc., etc. So lots of good stories coming out of it. If you are interested, we've got some. Yes, Doug, I'll touch on BidWrite GPT in a sec. If you are interested, the next programs are on your screen, and I think what we will be able to do is to give you 4 ways to move forward from here if you want to, right? So if you want to get involved and jump on one of the programs, we'll be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow. So with some details in there. My colleague Lara, I'm hoping is popping in some links into the chat at the moment. So if you want an information pack about either the Bid Accelerator or the Certified Bid Writer program, just click on that link. By all means, feel free to stick around and ask questions. And you can also click on a link here to book a one-on-one call with my lovely self. And so folks, that's about the size of it. Let me just come back up to, are there places on the June Bid Accelerator? Let's come back. So not on the June Bid Accelerator. The next one I think is the September for that one, which will probably be the last one. All right, is it first advisable to do the bid basics before either? Doug, if you've got a reasonable understanding of bidding, it's not necessarily, it's not a precursor to do that. You might want to do the bid basics if you just wanted to get a feel for the Bid Academy and the way that we roll and what our training experience is going to be like for you, but it's not a prerequisite. Barnaby, good on you. What else have we got? Let me just come back to the question around, some good takeaways from Jana, that's great. Doug, just a little bit more about BidWrite GPT. I can certainly talk to you about that. For those that are left on the call, just a bit about AI. I'd be really interested, I'll talk to you a little bit about BidWrite GPT in a sec, but I'd be really interested in what your feelings are about generative AI in the bid writing space, right? So there's 5 words up on the screen. For those that are still on the call, if you wouldn't mind just popping in the word that connects most with you about your feelings to do with AI. Are you feeling curious about it? Are you feeling excited about it? Paula's feeling a bit worried about it. Chad's excited. Or are you feeling skeptical about it? So it's kind of growing. It's a growing world. Now at BidWrite, for those of you who will remember at the end of 2022, ChatGPT burst onto the scenes. And we as an organization thought, well, is this our Kodak moment for those that are old enough to have actually taken a picture with one of those old cameras and had it developed at the pharmacy? Wait a couple of weeks and then you get to see if your picture's any good. Kodak didn't see the age of the digital image coming. Good on you, Doug. Same as me. So we were a bit worried that this generative AI might be BidWrite's Kodak moment. So we've actually partnered with a GPT specialist organization to help us build our own generative AI platform. And like I mentioned when we were talking about ISBP, fundamentally what we're trying to do is make it easier for people to master the skills of best practice bidding by embodying a lot of the work-winning IP that we use at BidWrite inside of generative AI frameworks and tools. So for example, inside of BidWrite GPT, we have an assistant that helps us do that compel bit. We call it to make content compelling, right? Which is maybe to apply ISBP or to put some tables in there or help it with bullets and call outs and stuff like that. So we've actually been able to embody ISBP into our AIs to help us to make our writing better. So if you want to find out more about BidWrite GPT, just pop a note in the chat and we'll have one of the sales team get in touch with you and talk you through it. Pam's question, great question. Is there much crossover between Bid Accelerator and the BidWriter? If you think about the Bid Accelerator as covering the whole sales cycle from market strategy through to negotiation, we cover persuasive writing in the Bid Accelerator, but what the certified bid writer does is go a lot deeper just on that portion of the sales cycle. So if writing is your thing, or you want to upskill the level of competence in a team that's responsible for writing your bids, that's the one to do, because you actually do some assignments and do some work with your coach to make sure you get to a minimum quality standard. So it's really the accelerator's not so much I suppose it is a generalist course, but it's more if you're involved in organizational change, maybe your strike rate's not where it needs to be, or maybe you're losing a lot of staff because of a busy workload that you've got. Doug's question on AI it's definitely the question of the moment. How much will AI take that bid writing creativity out of our hands? Doug, the way I think of it, I was playing around with our application this morning, right? And I think the way I think of it is, if you are a lazy bidder today, AI is not going to change. I'm not suggesting you are, but Doug, by the way, just saying. But if you're happy to just churn out generic responses and chug them in today, AI is just going to make that quicker for you, right? But really, you still need to understand best practice bid writing, best practice bidding in order to get the most out of these tools, right? You need to know what good looks like. You need how to drive these assistants to do what we want them to do, which is to help us write better bids. So I just think of generative AI as the next tool. that we have at our disposal to use it. The challenge, of course, is most people's perception is influenced by ChatGPT, right? So, which, if you think about it, is a whole load of stuff that's been put into an infosphere without any real control and intent. So, how will your AI be different to how we can rewrite something with ChatGPT? The fundamental difference, Doug, will be we're embodying our work-winning IP inside of our assistants, right? So, for example, the process of writing an ISBP compliant tender will become a lot quicker because it's going to help you with your issue statements, for example, how to apply your solution, and some best practice ideas around what a benefit statement should be. That's sort of hardwired into the way the tech works, right? So you still need to interact with it. But that's the other key difference, of course, with ChatGPT is security and privacy, right? So ChatGPT, you're out there, every time you interact with it, you're putting it into the world's sea of words that anyone can find. BidWrite GPT is inside a private and secure environment, but really the main difference is it's built specifically by bidding people for bidding. So it will hopefully make your lives easier. Goodness me, where did the time go? I've been talking at my screen for 46 minutes now. Folks, I better thank you for your time. Thank you for all your questions as well. If anyone wants to just stick on the line afterwards, happy to stick around and have a chat, but I will release you to the rest of your day. And thanks once again for joining our webinar today.